everyone and welcome back to the channel. My name is Vanessa if you are new here. This video is an exciting one for me. Coming up in the next couple of weeks is the feast day of Our Lady of Guadalupe. The story of Our Lady of Guadalupe has always deeply touched me. For one, it is one of my favorite Marian apparitions. I am Mexican and I grew up in LA, so this story is very deeply rooted in my culture. But also, this story of Our Lady of Guadalupe really changed everything for me in many ways. One, the story is the main reason I became so invested in researching the Catholic faith. And second, the videos that I made about Our Lady of Guadalupe a few years ago are a reason, or one of the main reasons, that many of you guys are my viewers today. Given that there's so much time from the previous videos to now, I wanted to sit down and remake these videos. If you have not seen those videos nor know the story of Our Lady of Guadalupe, well then you are in for a treat. So, who is Our Lady of Guadalupe? Well, Our Lady of Guadalupe is one of the Marian apparitions. The belief of these Marian apparitions is not a necessity for Catholics to believe in, nor is it doctrine, but many Catholics do hold to the belief of these miracles being true. A Marian apparition is just how it sounds. It is a time when Mary, the mother of our Lord, appeared. Usually her appearance is to relay a message to someone on earth. What makes this Marian apparition so cool and so amazing is the amount of physical and documental evidence that came from Mary appearing back in the 16th century. But before we get into that, the apparition itself, let us understand what was occurring in the world during that time. During the time of the apparition in Mexican history, there was a major migration and conquest of the Europeans to the country of Mexico. This migration of the Europeans resulted in much destruction, such as death by murder and/or disease to the Aztec people. Due to this destruction brought on by the migration of the Europeans to Mexico, the Aztec people lacked trust in anyone who decided to travel to their country. Not only was a conquest taking place, but missionaries, Franciscan missionaries, were making their way to Mexico. However, the missionaries' quest was very different from the quest of the conquistors. The missionaries were there to spread the truth of the church to the Aztec people, who were largely majority practicing Deans during that time. There were 25 million Deans to be exact. The missionaries, although traveling to Mexico, were actually known to defend the Indians who inhabited the land. In order to educate the Aztec people, the missionaries sought ways to evangelize the people that fit the needs of those people. This was very different than any evangelization that has ever been done before. Instead of force, they attempted to relate to the people to make evangelizing something the Aztecs would be willing to receive. A major goal of the missionaries was to evangelize the Aztec people without ever making them feel less than the missionaries. The missionaries recognized that these people would one day be possible future priests to guide and lead the members of the church, and that at no point should they ever be looked down upon. In order to better relate to the Aztec people, the missionaries developed colleges where both the missionaries and the people could study the culture and the practices and the rights of the Indian people. The missionaries themselves also studied local dialects in order to translate religious works into the local dialect of the people. One individual in particular who was going through the catechizing process was a man named Juan Diego, and this is where our story begins. Juan Diego, on an early December morning of 1531, would experience something that would change the world forever. On December 9th, 1531, Juan Diego set foot to attend his catechetical, I'm saying that so wrong, instruction in Telpetelac, which I'm also probably saying wrong. This church of St. James was near where his uncle Juan Bernardino lived. While on his way, Juan Diego heard celestial music coming from the top of Tepeyac Hill, which was the hill that Juan Diego had to pass on his way to his parish. Interested in the root of the music, Juan Diego climbed the hill and saw a young woman in clothes that radiated extraordinary light. The woman called Juan Diego her beloved son and introduced herself as the Mother of God, the Virgin Mary, the Lord of heaven and earth. She indicated that she was appearing to Juan Diego with the request that he would ask the Bishop of Mexico to build a chapel at the foot of the hill. She indicated to Juan Diego that she would be at his aid during the request. That same day, Juan Diego did as he was told and asked the bishop, Zumaraga, to build a chapel at the foot of the hill, as our mother who appeared to him requested. With such a great request, under extraordinary circumstances, the bishop did not believe him and asked him for him to return later on at a different time. Juan Diego, with a negative response from the bishop, returned to the hill to meet our mother again to relay this information. Juan Diego recognized that he was just an average man, and that of course the bishop would not listen to his requests, and asked for her to find someone else to aid her in her quest. Mother Mary wanted Juan Diego to do it though, so she instructed him to try again the following day. On the Sunday, December the 10th, Juan Diego did as he was asked, went to morning mass, and asked the bishop once again to say yes to the mother's request. The bishop, still unsure of the truth behind the quest, pleaded for Juan Diego to bring a sign to show that he was speaking the truth. Juan Diego once again met with Mother Mary and told her that he needed a sign to show the bishop, as was requested by the bishop. Mary was to provide a sign the following day to Juan Diego to present to the bishop. The following day, however, December 11th came around and Juan Diego did not return to the hill to meet with our mother. This was due to the fact that his uncle, Juan Bernardino, who I previously mentioned, was ill and needed immediate medical attention. Instead of returning to the hill, Juan Diego sought a doctor. The next day, December the 12th, Juan Diego recognized the state of his uncle's illness and set off to find a priest. Knowing that Tepeyac Hill, where Mary appeared to him, was on the route to the parish, he decided that he was going to do everything in his power to avoid the hill and to avoid confronting Mary and his lack of appearance to her the past few days. Despite his attempt, Juan Diego was confronted by our mother, Mary. Juan Diego quickly explained to her why he didn't show up and the state of his uncle's health. Mary told Juan Diego that his uncle would be healed and not to worry about him, and he was to complete her request instead. Mary then instructed him to go up to the top of the hill and pick up flowers for her. Just to remind you, this was all taking place in the cold of December, and the likelihood that there would be any flowers at the top of the hill was slim to none. So Juan Diego, preoccupied with stress from his uncle's illness, was confused at her request. But as Mother Mary promised, upon his arrival at the top of the hill, there was beautifully blooming flowers, such as Castilian roses. The reason that we note that these roses were present is that these roses were common in Spain and not so much in Mexico, where our story takes place. Juan Diego gathered the flowers in the tilma and brought them to Mary. Mother Mary rearranged the flowers in the tilma and sent Juan Diego on his way to the bishop to ask again. This was the third time Juan Diego returned to the bishop, and due to this, some servants attempted to stop Juan Diego. Juan Diego, determined to complete Mary's request, explained why he was there and unwrapped the tilma and revealed the flowers that Mary had instructed him to bring to the bishop. As expected, the bishop and the servants and Juan Diego were in awe of the sign of Mary presented. But they were not in awe of the flowers, but what the flowers revealed on the tilma itself. On the tilma was an image that appeared. This image was the apparition of Our Lady herself. Astonished by this beauty of this beautiful image, the bishop took the tilma and brought it to his chapel. Because of the amazing things of Our Lady, Juan Diego stayed with the bishop until the 13th and told them where the temple was to be built. Once the 13th rolled around, Juan Diego had to retreat back home and visit his ill uncle that was dying the last time he saw him. As Mother Mary promised, Juan Diego had nothing to worry about since his uncle had been restored to health and cured. The uncle explained to Juan Diego that at the exact same time that Juan Diego had met the Virgin Mary, the uncle did as well, and she restored him back to health. Because of this, he was instructed to tell the bishop that the apparition was to be called Perfect Virgin, Our Lady of Guadalupe. What made the appearance of Mary to the uncle so significant is that the uncle was an older age, and being of an older age, his story would have been seen as more valid. An interesting thing to note, the name or word Guadalupe was not part of the vocab of the Indian people, but instead was known among the Spanish, since it was the name of a Marian shrine located in Spain. This further validated the truth behind the story, since there would be no real reason as to why Juan Diego or his uncle would have been familiar or aware of this name. As promised, the temple was built at the foot of Tepeyac Hill in as quick as 2 weeks by the Indians. Not only is this story amazing, but what came from the story being passed along is amazing in and of itself. The apparition appearing and the image being displayed on the tilma led to the conversion of 9 million Indians to Christianity in 8 years. Note that at the time that the apparition appeared, there was only 40 Catholic missionaries present in Mexico. But following this appearance of the apparition, large groups of 200 to 300 converts had came to be baptized. People were coming from all over, from any age group to convert to Christianity. It is said, due to the great amounts of people who wanted to receive the sacrament of baptism, the Franciscan missionaries were found to be exhausted and sometimes were unable to find the strength to raise their hand to administer the sacrament. Now you may be wondering, how many people were being baptized that this resulted in such tiredness? Well, it is said that missionaries baptized 400 to 600 people daily. Oh shoot, I'm sorry. I misread my notes. 4,000 to 6,000 people daily. Believe it or not, it is said that 2 priests baptized 15,000 people. This was one of the largest conversions of people to the faith ever in such a short amount of time. Not only did the apparition lead to the conversions of millions of people to the faith, but it also led to the conversion of many people in the heart. Prior to the conversions in 1531 and the apparition appearance, polygamy was a huge problem. But after the apparition, the people abandoned polygamy and 500 couples were married a day. A day, and I can't even get married. This apparition led great conversions of heart. People began recognizing their sinful ways and their need to return to God following their sin, and sought the need to confess their sins. People would travel several days to receive the sacrament of reconciliation from the missionaries. So much traveling was going on to be baptized, to confess your sins, for marriage, that it is said that people or children were born along these pilgrimages. This apparition of Mary led many people to God, led many people to the truth, and led many people from their sinful ways. At this time, people didn't have the internet or phones, so most of the conversion was based off believing without the need of seeing, but trusting in the Lord and accepting His message of the need of conversion that He sent His mother to seek for us. It is an amazing thing. This happened about 500 years ago, and the impact of the image is still continuing today. What is really interesting is that as science and our ability to grasp history through archaeology and science in many forms, the apparition and the image still reveal new truths to us and continue to cause the conversion of the masses. It is almost every day since the apparition in 1531 that something new about the image comes to light. So this isn't just a story from 500 years ago, but instead a story that keeps growing in volumes. Now you may be wondering what I mean by this. Well, the image itself isn't just a painted image of Mary, but instead has many things embedded and encoded within it that are just mind-blowing. 2 weeks following the image appearing on the tilma, thousands of Indians made a pilgrimage from the bishop's chapel from where the tilma was being held to the temple. Great celebrations were being held during this pilgrimage. A little fun fact or interesting story about one of the celebrations was that a man was pierced by a celebratory arrow that was shot into the sky. This arrow killed the man, but once he was brought to the tilma and the arrow had been removed, he was brought back to life. Another interesting healing moment that came from the tilma was in 1545, when a great disease epidemic broke out and took the lives of thousands of natives. This disease was unknown and very powerful since it had come from Europe, and the doctors were deemed helpless. Well, when you're Catholic and nothing seems to be working in the world, we often pray and rely on God to help us find a solution or a miracle. Well, the Franciscan missionaries did just that. They made a procession of children to the image to beg for help. Following this plea for help, the epidemic died out. And because of this, it is universally attributed that Our Lady's intervention was the root of the healing. So let us talk about the tilma and the image itself. So in the image, we see the Virgin Mary, Our Lady of Guadalupe. The lady in the image is not masked, which is significant because this indicates that she is human, since it would be custom for gods of the Indians to be depicted as masked. So from this, we understand that the Indian people understood that this lady was not a god, but human. The lady is seen to be standing on the moon as she covers the sun, and her mantle is bluish green. The bluish-green color is reserved for rulers, and this indicates that she is powerful. In fact, more powerful than any of the Indian people's gods. This color indicates that she is also seen as a queen. She is surrounded by clouds and mists, which indicate that she is of divine mission. The lady's hair is laying loose, which indicates virginity. Notice that there is a black sash around her. This indicates that she is pregnant. And on her womb, there is a flower, a quincunx flower, which has 5 parts, 4 petals and 1 center. This flower signifies divinity and transcendence. The flower was an Aztec ideal that means harmony and beauty. The 5 parts symbolize man meeting God. With all these parts and meanings behind this flower, it indicates that this is a virgin who bears the true God in her womb. The tunic of Mary also has some message behind it as well. On her tunic are symbols in the form of pictures. These pictograms were actually used by Indians as code that they would have used on a daily basis. These symbols explain a new era of human history would be called civilization of love. The mantle that Mary is wearing is blue, which to the Aztecs signified heavens, which is the seat of the gods. There are stars on her mantle, which are not just there to look pretty, but instead have a message of their own. The arrangement of the stars are very, very significant. A study that was conducted in 1981 found that the arrangement of the stars were the exact arrangement of the stars over Mexico in December of 1531, the time the apparition appeared. Although the stars are in the arrangement of the sky during the time, the stars are not arranged in a genocentric way, which means as seen from the earth, but instead in a heliocentric way, which means that they are placed as though they were being viewed from the sun. Because of this, the observation point of the arrangement of stars is at the center of the womb, where the flower we talked about earlier is. Another super interesting thing about the tilma is that its ability to communicate things to many different groups of people despite there being different cultures and languages. For both of the cultures involved, the Aztecs and the Spanish, they were both able to obtain different importance from the image. The Aztec people recognized the symbolism that was shown in the image and were able to understand the pictographs, whereas the Spanish were able to detect and understand the connection between some of the art that reflects the teachings in the image. Due to both cultures finding different things, it allowed for them to come together, and this created a new culture among the two groups that unified and brought them together. This culture was known as Mexican. These different groups are significant also in the tilma themselves. As pictured on the tilma is dark-skinned. From a distance, it is said Mary appears to be Indian, whereas if you're close up, she appears as though she is a white woman. Due to this caused the two worlds of the Indians and the Spanish to emerge because she reflected both of them. These two cultures had no interest in leaving their own culture behind and joining a new, but this caused them to become one, which is what the Church of Christ wants us to be, one. Also note that since Mary was depicted as a deeper skin tone, it caused the Europeans and the Indians to recognize the mestizo people as being important and held the mestizo people with great reverence. This attitude towards a mixed race is very different than what was prior to the apparition. Before the apparition appeared, those who were of mixed cultures from the Indian and Spanish were treated as products of rape and as seen as unwanted. And people left these people to be abandoned. But this narrative and view totally changed with the image of the tilma. Much fascination was brought from the image that it resulted in people wanting to study it more and more. In 1633 to 1666, the first systematic studies were conducted on the image by both painters and physicians. Although these studies began about 100 years after the tilma image appeared, the tools that would fully be needed to understand this image would come later in the 20th century. Hence my comment of the study of the image continuing till today and beyond. A person that we can attribute a lot of findings to and interest in the image is Father Rojas Sanchez, who believed that the science could explain new things in the tilma. Through his studies, he was able to find that the tilma is connected to nature. When he took the landscape of Tepeyac Hill and the Tilma itself, he saw that the landscape was reflected on the Tilma. But it isn't just reflected, but when the placement of the landscape is centered on the quincunx flower on the Tilma, it reflected the landscape almost perfectly. Years later, in 2008, a mathematician by the name of Fernando Ojeda Llanes found that the findings by Father Rojas, if altered a bit, actually had a correspondent to the landscape of 92.9%. The people at the time the image appeared would not have had the technology, nor had the know-how to replicate such a correspondence on the Tilma. Father Rojas was also intrigued with the stars depicted on the fabric and believed there must be something significant about them, and was he right? Examinations that were conducted found that the stars that stretched out over the night sky during December 1531 reflected on the Tilma. New technology found that the exact point in time that the star layout that was depicted on the Tilma would have been the exact stars that would have been over Mexico at 6:45 a.m. on December 12, 1531. The oldest document that holds the story of Our Lady of Guadalupe's apparition, the Nincan Mafua, shows that was the exact time and moment that Juan Diego would have shown the Tilma to the bishop. Another interesting thing about the stars and constellations that are present is that there are 7 constellations that have 100% correspondence with the Tilma. 2 other constellations or stars have a 95% correspondence, and the other 3 remaining constellations have a correspondence of 99%, 94%, and 91%. Another interesting and amazing thing about the Earth, stars, and nature and the correspondent to the image on the Tilma is the tilt of Our Lady's head. Our Lady's head is inclined at 23.5 degrees, which is the same incline of the Earth's equatorial plane to the elliptical plane. I'm probably saying those words so wrong, but science, the incline, significant. But you may be wondering, why is this significant? Well, the tilt of the head shows an act of humility and subordination to God, since it is a perfect imitation of the Earth's incline to the sun. Another cool thing, and I feel like I keep saying that, so just assume any new thing that I tell you is considered cool. So if I get redundant, please don't get mad at me, okay? Everything is cool about this Tilma. But another thing about the Tilma is that the Tilma offers music. Now you may be wondering, what do I mean by this? But the Tilma itself can be seen as a sheet of music. The stars and the flowers on the Tilma total to 46. And if you draw lines in between them, 23 lines, it actually makes a song sheet. When you play the song sheet, you find that it makes beautiful, harmonious music. Studies were conducted to see if the musical patterns and the song could be taken from the night sky of different star patterns at any point of the day following that day. But the stars only make the beautiful music at 6:45, the time the Tilma was shown. Any other time frame surrounding it, the music instead sounds bad. It doesn't sound like music. Music was a very, very important thing also in our story of Juan Diego. For when he first saw Our Lady, he heard music. Now, another thing to know about the Tilma is the eyes of Our Lady. Now, people say that you can tell a lot about a person based off their eyes. And that is so true when it comes to our mother's eyes on the Tilma. Upon examination of the Tilma, there have been findings of depictions taking place in her eyes. In 1929, a photographer was the first to detect an image in the eyes. In her right iris is a bearded man depicted. Later in 1951, another photographer, the official photographer of the basilica, found a very clear outline of a man in Our Lady's right eye. With further examinations, they found that there are other individuals found in her eyes. In the corners of both of her eyes, there can be seen upper halves of people. In her eyes, we can see a total of 13 people depicted. This was a new finding after years of examination. Many people were curious as to who these people were, but with outside documents such as the Ninca Manfua, they were able to find that in Mary's eyes was the exact moment that the Tilma was revealed to the bishop, and that the 13 people who were depicted in the eyes were, 1, a kneeling Indian man who had his hair tied back, and his hair being tied back was a custom that was done in the 16th century. To the right of the man, we can see a bearded man who was later identified to be most likely the bishop, since his depiction is very similar to a painting that was done of him in the 18th century. Another man that we can see is standing behind the bishop. This man was later to be identified as the assistant to the bishop because according to records, the bishop would have needed a translator, and this translator was named Juan Gonzalez, and he was present at the time the tilma was revealed. The fourth person that we can see is Juan Diego himself, and we can see Juan Diego wearing a hat in a way that Indians would have worn them during the 16th century. A fifth person that we can see is a slave woman that is depicted. The sixth person is another bearded man to the right. He is the largest figure, which indicates that he is the closest to the tilma. And many claim that he was a newly appointed general administrator of Mexico who had been a guest on that day, but his identity is still kind of unknown. And the last group of people 7 through 13, are seen as a family of 7, 2 parents and 5 children, yet their specific identities still remain unknown. Not only are these depictions of people in the eyes of Our Lady, but the eyes in and of themselves are quite fascinating. Studies have found that Mary's eyes reflect images and distort images exactly how regular human eyes do. In fact, the reflection distorts the image in such a way that the images in the eyes are concaved, just how regular eyes would be. Another interesting thing is that the images in the eyes are not identical. The bearded man in the eye is distorted in different ways in both eyes, which is exactly how human eyes would do things, how they would have this natural curve based on the cornea. If this image were fabricated or fake, the person would have had to have painted or done the image with these distortions in it, and that's possibly impossible to replicate. It is said that her eyes look so real that examiners had to restrain themselves from asking Our Lady to move her eyes up and down so that they could see the images more clearly. Now that we've gone over the amazing image itself, let us talk about the tilma itself and its durability. The tilma is extremely durable. This goes without saying, honestly, hence why this tilma is still around throughout the years. But remember, the image first appeared in 1531, so that ages this tilma at least 500 years. However, the durability of such a tilma is something unexplainable. The tilma is made of agave thread. This thread is one that would have been typically used as a bag or a coat, and was expected to wear out and fall apart quite quickly. But the oldest known agave thread that lasted was up to 40 years. There's no material of agave that still remains from the 16th century, except for the tilma. Art conservators have indicated that the tilma itself has had no serious defects or signs of aging. A tilma that is nearly 500 years old, that should have only lasted up to 40 years, has no signs of aging? Like what? Now, one may argue that the tilma was protected for all these years and that is why it lasted and has no aging or defects. But that is actually not true. The tilma has not always been protected as it is today, or at least not as thoroughly protected. For the first 100 years of the tilma, from the years of 1531 to 1647, the tilma was on display with no protective glass. During this time, people were making these pilgrimages and they were touching it, they were kissing it, they were lighting candles near it, incense near it, yet the tilma never faced any aging. The chapel where the tilma was originally held, in fact, faced a flood, and this flood water went up 3 feet. This flood was so destructive on the chapel that it caused the walls to crumble. But the tilma still remains with no major age defects. This ability to sustain many touchings, kissings, being around incense and water and smoke has led many people to wonder, how could this be? So a study was conducted in 1789. In 1789, an experiment was done where 8 artists were commissioned to recreate the tilma as close to the original as possible. All of the copies fell apart in several years. The most durable copy of the tilma lasted only up to 9 years. Now, like I said, the tilma had not faced the most perfect conditions throughout the years. In 1791, a devastating thing occurred that would have left no tilma. When the frame was being polished, nitric acid was spilled on the upper part of the image and was wiped away with a rag. This type of acid would have burned a hole in any given material that it was spilled upon, but the image was not torn one bit, nor was it torn when they were rubbing it with a rag. It did sustain some stains, but those stains have faded throughout the years. Stains from nitric acid faded? Like, in what world does this happen? I guess in this world, on Our Lady of Guadalupe's Tilma. What material would have been able to sustain anything from nitric acid? In fact, the Tilma itself had no dust, nor dirt, nor bugs be able to adhere to the image, and there's like no insects that chewed through this image. An interesting thing to note is that the Tilma of Juan Diego is actually two cloths sewn together. Because of this, there is a vertical seam that divides the image. These two cloths are not tightly sewn together at all, but instead are like really lightly laced together. With the weight of the Tilma, throughout the years, this seam would have torn apart, but it has not. The material that the Tilma is made of would have needed to go through a special preparation for the image to be painted on it if the image were painted on the Tilma. The Tilma would have needed to be primed, but there is no residue that indicates that it was. In fact, the weaving of the agave thread is so loose that we can see through it, which if primed, we would not be able to do so. So this therefore shows us that there is no way that this Tilma was primed before the image was there. What paint also, like let's ask ourselves, what paint could last 500 years on an unprimed surface? Well, it is said that there is no paint that is actually on the Tilma. A study was conducted in 1936 where 2 threads of the Tilma were sent in for examination, and these 2 threads found that there was no material or vegetable that are present on the threads, that the threads are just simply colored. These 2 threads that were sent in were yellow and the other one was pink, yet once again the research conducted shows that there is no pigment on either one. A conclusion was drawn that the threads were not painted on, but just simply were colored in and of themselves. Alongside these findings is that there is no trace of brush strokes on the image, nor any sketches that could have been done on the Tilma, further proving that the Tilma was not painted on. In the 16th century, there was some unknown artist who wanted to highlight different things on the Tilma, so they decided that they were going to paint on the Tilma. Can you believe that? Like, they were like, I'm going to paint on this Tilma. Like, why would you do that? So they decided to use their own paint to paint on the Tilma to highlight the points that they thought were important. But the parts that they painted, that paint darkened throughout the years and peeled over time, where the original image on the Tilma remains untouched and the colors are said to be more vibrant than they were 500 years ago. The cloth of the Tilma is said to be silky smooth, whereas on the back side of the Tilma where the image is not, it is said to be coarse. Another devastating thing that took place in 1921, where once again another tragedy of losing the Tilma could have occurred. In 1921, the church where the Tilma was held was victim to a bombing. This bombing blasted so close to the Tilma that the marble floor and glass surrounding the Tilma had all been broken. But the glass on the Tilma and the Tilma itself remained intact. There is so much research that has been done on the Tilma and continues to be done on the Tilma today. This Tilma has become a universal message to the people on earth from heaven. This is the same universal, united call that Christ asked for us to be. Now, this video just scratches the surface of the amazing things the Tilma and the apparition of Our Lady of Guadalupe offers. I really hope this video helps with a greater understanding and love for the coming feast day of Our Lady of Guadalupe and what she did for the people of Mexico and for the people of the world. If I missed any amazing facts in this video, because I'm sure I did, be sure to comment some of them down below because I want to be reminded, I want to learn new things. Let me know what you guys have found. Research this for yourself. It's mind-blowing. It will keep you up at night. I want to thank you guys all so much for stopping by and listening to this amazing story of this amazing apparition. I hope you learned something new and that this piqued your interest in this amazing story. I will be praying for you and I ask that you also pray for me. Have a happy feast day of Our Lady of Guadalupe. God bless you. I love you. Bye-bye.